I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on kind of how data is currently used and what's maybe coming up in the future with more technology, and how that's going to improve the or change the role of the analyst really kind of over the next few years.
Oh, it's changed massively. I think the use of data, like, gone are the days when we wanted to know how many passes somebody made or how many tackles they made. It's for me, it's become much more complex than that. And obviously, even beyond like XG and all of those kind of models, you're talking really about sequential data now and patterns of play and actually players impacting other players. And I think that's when it gets really complex, is like to actually talking about relationships and using data to kind of really establish those things, which I say, again, more sequential kind of forms. I obviously think the big one that we've always tried to kind of like look at is off the ball behavior, and off the ball data, in moments where you actually do nothing, you've got no contact with the ball, and how can we actually analyze performance in that way? I think that will continue to be an important part of analysis and how it kind of grows. But I think obviously the more that technology advances and develops, we're talking about, predictive performance. And I think that's the most important thing now, especially from a scouting perspective, in terms of being actually able to predict a player's performance, whether that be moving from one country to another, or one league to another, or one style of play and team philosophy to a different team philosophy and style of play, to actually going, okay, well, what does their age curve look like? What do we expect their performance to be in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, based on all the information that we've got now and that we've acquired previously? So I think forecasting for future, and say AI models, which actually do the hard work for you and allow you then to spend time assessing the data rather than having to write code and spend your time actually building the data sets, is going to be really important. And then I think off the back of that as well, looking the other way. So using the data that we've gathered from years ago, and this is massively right in player development and academy players, like how do we see what the 15-year-old who came through our academy and made it to first team and we sold to whatever club for $10 million, like what was he doing as a 15-year-old and what did he look like, and how do we then replicate that or find that in our current 15-year-olds? So I think that changes the dynamic of analysis and where it's going in those two different ways, like especially in terms of scouting, and predictive performance, but also then in what we're doing to develop players at a younger age. And that impacts scouting, right? Because if you've got that player in your academy who is 15 and is hitting all the benchmarks that you expect a 15-year-old to then become a successful first team player, that impacts your scouting process and what you're looking to do from a scouting perspective, because you don't want to buy over that player. So it's kind of all interlinked, but I think it becomes a lot more kind of scout based and kind of driven by that than necessarily first team performance.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, for someone kind of just starting out in their analysis journey, Lucy, what would you would you be able to give some advice for someone that's maybe not come from a data background, just to get that introduction and dip the toe into the data side of things, if it's not their kind of main forte?
Yeah and no. I think there are some incredibly sophisticated and well-educated data scientists and analysts now. And I think when clubs are looking to fill those positions, they're going to go for people with extensive experience in Python and all these data kind of programming systems. And that's fine. That's a different job. Like, because as I said, I think almost in that role as well, you don't even need to have a football knowledge. Like you can come from a totally different background, but your skills may be more in data mining, data engineering, and all of that kind of stuff. I think what is better is to excel and focus your efforts and time on what you're good at, which can be data analysis rather than data science. And that's actually learning the art of interpreting data, communicating it, because that is fundamentally the most important part of data analysis, in my opinion, is how you communicate the data to people who are going to make decisions. because, with all due respect, a data scientist and the language they speak is not relevant to a technical director or a general manager who's making the decision on signing players. And so I think for anybody who's not well versed in sophisticated data analysis, you don't need to be. You need to, or data kind of science, I should say. I think the important part is focusing on what your skill set is, and that could be data analysis and communication, or it could be scouting. It could be subjective and actually focusing on that side, because that's a different side and a different type of analysis, but equally as important.
Yeah,